Hello, dear viewers. Thank you so much for joining me today again. I have something very difficult to read on. George Floyd, you may have seen the footage. This happened in Minneapolis, and I live in Minnesota. I am heartbroken. He was murdered. He was murdered by 4 police officers in broad daylight after having shown no signs of resisting arrest. To me, I saw the videos. Did you? Being handcuffed and on the ground. He was murdered. One officer kneeled on his neck. Some footage shows the other officers on him as well. Another couple stood by. There were people who were saying, "You're killing him." He was saying, "I can't breathe." Repeatedly. He told the crowd, "They're going to kill me." When he was on the ground, already handcuffed, didn't need to be kept down there. He was murdered in broad daylight with a crowd of people pleading with the police officers to let him go. So, there were protests last night. Started out peacefully, but many came in from many states. There's so much anger about this. There's so much anger and pent-up frustration. Why does this continue? So there was some, vandalism and a couple things stolen from a store once the windows had been busted in. But, we need to be careful not to focus on that. So some people had their anger blow up out of, my frustration and my anger that this keeps happening. And I'm not even a black or brown skin. Not even part of that. We're all part of that community. We're all part of the community, But my anger and frustration is so great. So I understand. It was, I think, almost 2 years ago that Blondo Castillo was killed in a suburb of Minneapolis by a police officer who was saying, well, he matched the description of somebody who'd done a crime. And Blondo Castillo was in his vehicle saying, yes, officer, whatever you want. He was asking if he could go get his identification, that he had a permit to carry a weapon. He was being very honest. He was saying he was trying not to get killed. Just like this man, trying not to get killed. And so here we are. The 4 officers were immediately terminated. They haven't been arrested yet. But the Minneapolis mayor called for their arrest. At least certainly the one that was kneeling on George Floyd's neck. But, other footage, like I said, shows that another couple officers were on him at some point during this too. And then, of course, there were the ones who didn't say anything. Who didn't plead with their fellow officer to get off of him, because it was absolutely not necessary to do that. So, and this was, by the way, I have to say, this was for an accusation that he used forged documents. I don't know what that was, counterfeit bill, I don't know. But that's an accusation. I almost hate to bring it up because this man didn't have his day in court. So, he did not have his day in court, so it doesn't even feel fair to bring that up, that accusation. I don't know if there was a counterfeit bill or what. Any of us could have passed that, not knowing it, whatever. The point is, this was a non-violent, non-aggressive kind of plan. Video shows him cooperating. He was cooperating. He was trying to plead his case. He was scared, I think. I think he knew. He knew he was going to die that day. He just knew it. And he knew the kind of cop he was dealing with, I think. And they walked into the car. They said he seemed to stumble, actually. And I almost wonder if it was the adrenaline, the fear, because he was kind of slumping over when they put him on against the wall, sitting him down for a while after. So I almost wonder if his body wasn't filled with adrenaline, and he seemed to like stumble and not quite get in the car, and they took that as resisting arrest, and then they did this. But then, of course, after they had him cuffed, they still were standing on him. I mean, kneeling on his neck. There was no way. There is no way this is anything but murder in broad daylight, with these police officers seeming to think that they were doing the right thing, seeming to think that their actions were acceptable, even with a crowd of onlookers pleading with him and saying, no, you're killing him, he can't breathe. George Floyd was unconscious. And they stayed, and this cop with the knee on the neck continued to have his knee on his neck after he was unconscious. They took him out on a stretcher, took him to HCMC where he died. So this is why it needs to be said that Black Lives Matter. For anybody who ever wondered, why do they have to say that? Don't all lives matter? This is why it has to be said. So, Spirit, what should we know about this? What is going to come of this? The man who had killed Blondo Castillo almost 2 years ago, he was acquitted. So, oh, God forbid. Okay, Spirit, so what comes of this? 10 of Swords. I'm going to do a challenge. That's a completion. That's a devastation. That's a betrayal. 3 of Coins is the challenge card over it. There are many attorneys being consulted right now, that's for sure. You guys, I don't have clarity right now, and maybe it is because I'm very emotional about this, but I don't have clarity right now about, does this mean they betray the Black community because the police get lawyers? Does that mean that? Or does it mean there's devastation coming to a completion with the 10 of Swords, and there's a beginning to build some new security? Consult with experts. Let's build some new security. I think it's both. I think it's a mixed bag. I think that the police officer who was kneeling on his neck does get charged and convicted, but not as much time as he should get. I don't know about the others. It's like a mixed bag. It's not enough. It's like what I'm hearing is what happens. It's like I'm hearing people say it's not enough. It's not enough. Yet, do they at least begin to realize that they need to do a lot more training, a lot more weeding out of police officers who, the whole system needs to be revised. I've read on this before. Our good officers need more support and help and education. Our officers who were always bad eggs or have gone that way need to be removed as quickly as possible. The whole thing needs to be transformed. The way they train officers, the education on implicit bias, and if there's bigotry and racism, that needs to be, those guys need to be off the beat. Those women need to be out of there. Out. because they're charged to protect all of us. You know, I think there's a little bit of a beginning with this card of some of that reform. A little bit of a beginning. 3 of coins. Okay, underneath it all, we have the devil. Greed and avarice. Clearly to me, right away I heard greed and avarice. Why is greed and avarice? Oh, yes. That's right. I'm talking about this overlying reform, this great overhaul that we need in the U.S. for our penal system and our police forces. This great overhaul that's needed. What gets in the way? Greed and avarice. We have so many for-profit prisons. It's become big business. That's why such a huge percentage of our population is imprisoned compared to other nations. 1 in 5 Americans have a criminal history. It's gotten ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. It's like a military. They're really setting up to be military police. Really, they are. You know, and I don't want to put down military police, because military police in their roles at the right times in history are just serving. They're serving their country. They're serving the people. But this is a bastardization of militarized police. These changes in how police are trained and how they're instructed. All right. And I do not want to say, I know that many police officers are good people who truly want to serve. But how do they enter a system like this? And how are they able to stay true to who they are? I mean, do they get desensitized to miscarriages of justice? They must, because there are so many, you know? Okay, in the past, we have the Queen of Swords. Yeah, people out there saying there's a problem. That's investigative journalism. That's people who, out of, pure logic for one thing, and for another thing, care and advocacy, saying we need change here. Disasters happen and they're going to keep happening. People with black and brown skin are going to keep on getting treated unjustly, unfairly jailed and imprisoned, murdered in our system. And that's why the frustration. That's why. Above it all, we have judgment is falling. The angels are sure helping with this one. They've been. I've gotten a very, very strong that this is an area where there are a lot of those on the other side trying to bring the clarity. So the angels are helping. Judgment does fall. I mean, this is on video, there is absolutely no way anybody, no matter how motivated they were to try to defend the police officer's actions, there's no way anybody could. In the immediate future, we have the 3 of Wands we're waiting. People are going to be watching and waiting on that trial, those trials. Yeah, somebody gets a sentence. Yes, I do see that. But I also do still see it feels like it's not enough. And for the group, the chief of police, though they're taking this very seriously, they get a lot of criticism, and rightly so. Rightly so. These bad eggs, this should have been detected by now. This man who thought he was just doing what he should do, and he just wasn't going to listen to the crowd, and he was just so full of self-righteousness and so sure he had the authority to do this. That should have been detected by now. This is a man who was on the force for many, many years. Word of the matter. 6 of coins. A little bit of justice is given. Okay. Home environment, 8 of cups. This falls during the middle of the pandemic. I think it's used. The pandemic is used as an excuse to diminish the protests. The protests, a lot of criticism for how they're being handled. There are rubber bullets, paint bullets, rubber bullets being used, people being harmed in the protests. Hopes and fears. We have the Knight of Swords. Well, there's the hope to win the day and the fear that aggression will dilute the message. And I do worry about that. That's why I don't like a lot of coverage of, okay, nobody's been, the protesters have not harmed anyone physically. The police have, with the rubber bullets and such, and the tear gas, they have, but the protesters have not harmed anyone physically yet. There's been vandalism. You know, that's an important distinction. Anyway, we have the Knight of Coins in the outcome. There has to be steady, faithful, dependable work by governmental workers, by employees, by bureaucrats, by those who are at all levels of government to do this reform. I like that I get the Knight of Coins in the outcome. It is a reminder again that we can be passionate about this and we can be upset and we can be, but it's going to be the people who faithfully work at reform that are going to get the job done. And so we should all be that. We should all be faithful to keep the pressure on to bring about this reform in our criminal justice system, in our police forces. The challenge is to still have hope, okay? To not become so discouraged that we give up. You know, we need to have hope, and through steady progress, it can get done. Greater security can be built. The moon, there are many secrets that have to be fleshed out about this situation, about this case as well. I feel very strongly as I'm watching that video, I sense what George may have been feeling, and he knew he was dealing with a bad cop. I know he did. He knew it. That's why the terror came. He knew it. He may have known him, even. Yeah. We have the Nine of Wands. He had bad encounters, difficult encounters before that were traumatizing, but he stayed standing. He kept going. Yeah. So his sister was on, so eloquently expressing her heartbreak and her concerns. And she said, she alluded to he had some sort of a misconduct before, but he'd put that all behind him. So he grew up, it seems, in not the most advantaged circumstances. Of course, any young black man could say that. You know, they don't have the privilege of having people assume, having law enforcement folks assume that they're fine. They don't have that privilege. They have to prove all the time that they're law-abiding, that they're not dangerous. And sometimes, no matter how law-abiding they are, it's not enough to prove it. So that this is an issue. This is a problem. This is a really big problem. But we are to be hopeful. We are to be steadfast. We are to keep working. We are to keep doing the hard work to make sure these reforms happen. There's a beginning here. There's a beginning. This case was so obvious. You know, I would challenge anyone to even try to find some justification for what those officers did. You can't. If you see the footage, you absolutely cannot. So what else should we know about this, Spirit? Page of Swords. We can speak out. It's good to speak out. Go ahead and say it. Go ahead and say it. Say it among your friends. Say it among your family. Say it. This is a huge problem. Don't be afraid. All of us need to stand up and say it. The Four of Cups. There will still be people not wanting to hear. That's why. That's why Spirit is telling us to say it. Say it. There is a problem. There is a reason for the Black Lives Matter movement. It needs to be supported. Okay. All right. Well, I thank you all for caring. I know many of you are really upset about this today too. And let's turn that into dogged pursuit of reform. Thank you. Bye-bye.